Okay, it looks like our attendance is kind of leveling out here. So I think we're going to go ahead and get started this morning. So happy Friday, everyone. So glad that you could join us today. Today we are going to walk through two different options that you have available to get support in mass updates and mass reconversion. So I'm going to go through just a couple of slides to reorient us with what the scope of this is. And then I'll walk through the particular files that are available for you to update if you do want to participate in this. So let's go. Okay. So today we're going to cover, there's two different options. So this all came about, this was in the digest. I hope that you've had a chance to read through the KBA, but today we're going to talk through two different options. Option one is a general project reconversion, specifically for general projects. And then with option B, it's updating any of your project personnel assignments. And so we're going to go through each of those, show you the files, and then we'll have some resources and Q&A. So we do have the chat turned off, but we do have the Q&A turned on. So feel free to use that Q&A. I'm going to go through each option and then do the Q&A for each section at a time. So here we go. So the general project reconversion, this is really only for general projects and it is optional. So this is not related to sponsored projects or capital projects. So why are we offering this to you? Based upon the general project structure webinar, we know that some departments would like to restructure their tasks to be individual projects so that they can use different level of financial management and reporting, leveraging the GL more instead of the PPM and using the PPM budgets at the task level. So what's going to be included in this reconversion if you participate? New projects will be created systematically, carrying all the data elements from your current task. We will also then do a mass cost transfer of all of the costs that are currently on your current project task to the newly created project task one. We will then also end date the old task by the end of this fiscal year. Okay. And then this process is not applicable to recharge operations because they do have a unique structure to outline their lines of service and the different types of activities within a recharge operation. So again, just to really highlight, this does not pertain to sponsored projects. If you do have questions about the structure of sponsored projects, here's a little bit more information and a link at the bottom for understanding the sponsored project structure, which is awards, projects, and then tasks. And so there's still many tasks associated with sponsored projects, and that's not changing. So going into a little bit more detail on these steps with the reconversion. Okay, so with a new reconversion, we have files. I'm going to go through these files here in a little bit. But what we would essentially do is that if you have a current project A task 5 and you say, yes, reconvert this and make it a new project, that's now going to become project B task 1. The new project name is going to carry over what the current project prefix is, and then add what the current task name is, okay, to keep that continuity. Any of the DFFs on the tasks, so those are what drives the fund function program and location, those will carry over. Okay, so we'll copy that over for that setup. Project classifications and project personnel will carry over. So if you have a task manager on your, in this example, task 5, that will become the new project manager in your new project. Okay, so unless there's no task manager, then the project manager will carry over. The new task name will equal the current task name. And just a reminder, all projects must have at least one task. So tasks are not going away. This reconversion is not saying we're not using tasks. If you want to choose not to use projects and do all your transactions directly in the GL, that's an option. I think most people are preferring to use projects and use PPM. But in PPM, all projects must have at least one task. Okay, so I really want to emphasize that. I think there's been a little bit of confusion around that. So step 2 on the mass cost transfer. all the transactions are going to be reversed from the current project and task and posted to the new project and task. So this is going to be, and then this will also post to the general ledger. So when we do this cost transfer in the sub ledger, that data will flow up to the general ledger. Okay? And so this is going to be everything. So we're planning on doing this in the month of May. So we're going to really take everything that's been posted from, even from the conversion, and convert that. So what are still going to be the department responsibilities? So those first two steps are what centrally we will support and do for you. But departments will still have their own responsibilities. So for instance, if you have any contracts that are associated with your current project and tasks, you'll need to amend those contracts to replace with your new projects and tasks. If you have any general ledger only transactions, you will still need to move those yourself or correct them appropriately, depending upon what it is. You'll need to update any of your upstream systems. So UC Path, you'll need to update that. There is no mass update for UC Path. So if you're currently paying somebody on, project A, task 5, and now you're going to be paying them on project B, task 1, you'll need to go in and update that funding in UC Path. However, we will have done that mass, essentially cost transfer for you. It won't keep the dopes in line in that scenario, but you will need to update your funding for going forward. You'll need to update any recharges that are currently using your current project task, any concur items, any requisitions, purchase orders, any detail codes and ISIS, anything else in where you're providing this current project task that now you're reconverting. You might need to review any in-flight transactions. So if you have any open purchase orders, unpaid AR, any concur items, any AP invoices that are in process, you'll need to work on ensuring that those are updated appropriately. And then if any costs do post to the old project task after this reconversion, then it'll be the department's responsibility to do those cost transfers to the new task. All right, so now let's go take a look at the file. Stop share here and switch over to the files. Okay, so here is the file. The link to where these files are was in the digest, or was linked in the digest through the KBA. And so this is broken out by every vice chancellor area. So really by entity is how we broke this out. And so when you go into one of these files, so this is the one for academic affairs, there's a tab here for each financial unit. So you do want to coordinate this for your financial unit, and then you're going to come into the file for your financial unit, and you're going to update column I. Column I is the only one that you're updating. So by default, all of these current projects and tasks are defaulted to an N, saying no, do not reconvert them. But you can enter a Y here if you do want it reconverted. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the beginning of this file and show you the data that's in this file that's pre-populated for you. So we have our project number. So this is all your current data by your financial unit. So project number, project name, what the status is, what the dates are, when it was created, right? So these were all the original conversion projects in terms of what we're looking at on the screen right now, and what the current task is. So in this case, if you're saying that you would like, project 102-3333, task 22 to be its own project, then you would put a Y in this field. Okay? If you'd like additional information, here you can see the additional task name, description, what the references are on the task, and what the DFFs are. So here's your fund, your function, your program, and your location. And then what the current project organization name is, financial unit, and then the task organization and thing. Okay. So ultimately, all you're doing is updating column I. Now you'll notice the title of this column says convert to project, yes, no, or sorry, this isn't showing the whole thing, or existing project. So we know that some of you may have already initiated this reconversion on your own. You may have already put in a request for a new project and task. And in your mind, you're now switching over the activities from a current project and task to the new one that you've already created or that you've already requested. If that's the case, that you already have a project, but maybe you haven't done all your cost transfers, you can put the new project number in this column. And then we will do the cost transfer piece, but we won't create that new project since you already have it created. For any of you that have pending snow tickets for this process, we are asking that you would withdraw that ticket if you want to take advantage of this process. And that's really highly recommended so that it can be, that we can support you doing that centrally. If you do have a current pending snow ticket for this, and you don't withdraw it and you don't take advantage of this, we'll still create the new project and task for you according to, timeline is based upon our resources, but then you would still need to do all the cost transfers yourself. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and take a look at some of our questions and answers right now. So that really covers the project reconversion. So please put your questions in the Q&A. And I'll answer any of the questions you have about this project reconversion. So when we create the new projects, we are going to be creating a single task. If later on down the road you want to add more tasks, you're more than welcome to. There's really no limit to the number of tasks that you can have on a project. I mean, there might be ultimately from Oracle, but it's not, I've seen some with hundreds already. So that might be a case where maybe you don't want hundreds of tasks. You'd really rather have hundreds of projects. So the timeline of when we are planning on doing this reconversion is that we're asking for the files back by April 28th. And then we'll be working on this reconversion in the month of May with the goal of it being completed by May ledger close. So that it really gives that 1 month buffer before fiscal year end, just to really make sure that if there's any other cleanup that needs to happen, that can. And when we do the mass conversion of costs, we will carry over the original expenditure item date. We will carry over the original transaction information. So you'll still retain all of that. We're not going to just say, oh, $100 was over here and we're going to move $100. No, we're really going to reverse, if you have 10 costs, we're going to reverse those 10 costs with that data and repost those 10 costs. There's a couple questions about UC Path and funding changes. What would the effective date of funding changes in Path be? I'll be honest, I'm not 100% sure how funding changes work in UC Path, but what I can say is that once we do this reconversion, if you're paying, let's say, you want to make sure that any new payroll that's being posted goes to your new project. So I don't know what. Those of you that know UC Path, maybe that helps. Otherwise, I can try after this. I'll try to get a more clear answer to that, and we can post that with this presentation and link it from the KBA as well. So there's a question about if there is a direct retro in process for project task that is up for the general project cost conversion. Most likely it's going to be a timing issue. And so if that posts before we do the mass cost transfer in May, then it'll get included. Otherwise, chances are it'll probably post to that original project task, and then you will need to manually do that cost transfer. Yes, the mass cost transfer will be before fiscal year end. And we are planning on end dating the, I'll say the old tasks with a June 30th date as well, so that any cost for this fiscal year would no longer be able to post to it. to change. There's a question about what do you need to do if the financial unit needs to change on the new project. That would not be for this reconversion. This reconversion is really when we're taking the same data elements. Let me go back and talk a little bit more about the mass cost transfers. So when we do the mass cost transfer, we will retain all of the original cost data. It will not be a lump sum conversion. So if you have 10 individual tasks, no matter the expenditure type, whether it be a 774009 or whether it be a 508000 or a 522401, doesn't matter. That original transaction we will reverse and repost. So if there's 10 transactions on the old project, we will move 10 transactions to the new project and carry over all of the existing data, such as the original expenditure item date and as much of the same reference information as possible. So if you have already created a new project, but you would like to only participate in the mass cost transfer portion, right? So when I talked about kind of the two parts of this reconversion, the creation of new projects and then the cost transfer piece, if you only want to take part in the mass cost transfer portion, then in this column I here, put your new project number. So you could, so put the new project. So I'm just kind of going through these. So for the links to these files, Laura, maybe in the chat you could put the link to the KBA that has links to these files. So we'll put that in the chat for you, and so that you can get to these files. But then within this file, so this file that we're looking at here, again, is all of the current projects and tasks for a financial unit. So all of the files are broken out by entity. And then there's a tab for each financial unit. So then for your financial unit, if you want to participate in this reconversion, then in column I, you would either put Y, and we will create a new project task 1, or put, if you've already submitted a snow request months ago and have a new project, then go ahead and put that project here, and we will only do the cost transfer portion of this reconversion. If you have entered a PPM budget, that will not move. No, this is really thinking about if you're planning on not really using PPM budgets, then and you want to reconvert so that you're not really using PPM budgets. That's really kind of where this came out of, is wanting to have a much more flattened project task structure. This does not apply to capital or sponsored projects. Every project is associated with a single project owning organization, and that is what drives the financial data to the financial unit in the general ledger. So this process is not going to change the financial unit. It's not going to add financial units. It's not going to merge financial units. If you require projects in a different financial unit, then that's still going to be a separate snow process to get that project created how you need it. Once we do the reconversion, then we will have a output file available for you that shows you what your new project and task will be. Recharge operations are not participating in this reconversion because they do have a unique structure for their projects in accordance with their lines of service. This process is really about a reconversion. This is not about creating just a new project because you have a new scope of work that's about to start. So that would still be done through the services and support ticket. And there's an existing ticket to request a new project and task. So that would be separate. This process is really focused on purely a reconversion. Okay. There's a couple of questions in here that I'm going to have to follow up on and probably communicate after the fact. So if you are in health sciences is going to be really coordinating the communication for their organization, for all the health sciences organizations, and really centrally gathering and participating in that. So health sciences is working on separate communications if they haven't sent that already. So I'll talk a little bit more. So within the UC Path realm, I can see that there's a number of questions about UC Path. And so with UC Path, so what this conversion will do is it's going to move all the existing costs from one place to the next. Any new transactions, you need to make sure that the new project task is being used. This is in lieu of doing direct retros for all of that potential payroll that might be moving, right? We did work with a pilot group and talked through some of these nuances, right? Well, we could create all of this and then have you do all those direct retros, but that seemed really burdensome. And so, in working with the pilot group, they really said, it'd be better if you just do all of the mass costs, knowing that the dopes are not going to be in sync now for that historical payroll for this last year. And then it'll be up to the departments to initiate that funding change for any payroll going forward. Now, if you do need to do a direct retro, let's say, you're reconverting this general project to general project, but now you're doing a direct retro to move it from that general project to a sponsored project. Well, in UC Path, they're still going to have that old data. So that might be a case where then if that is what you're doing, I'd really suggest doing all of that now before this goes into effect. But if that does happen and those direct retros post to your old project task, then you would need to do those manual cost transfers within Oracle to move them to this new project task. Once the new projects and tasks are created, we'll be able to communicate that to you. They will not be available to you until they're created. So this is different from when we did the initial conversion and the index mapping where you knew your projects ahead of time. This is not the case. Once they're created, then we'll communicate that out to you. Also at that time, they'll be available for EPBCS. I'll have to follow up with any other interactions or downstream impacts with EPBCS. Budgets will not be moving as part of this. So I would say if you're already using PPM budgets, then this may not be something that you want to participate in. This may not be the option that you want to do. So to reiterate, this is purely optional. This offering is coming out of the general projects structure webinar that we had a few weeks ago. I'd really recommend rewatching or re-listening to that webinar to really understand some different pros and cons about why you might want to do this reconversion or not. You can see that there's a lot of details and still a lot of department responsibilities if you do participate in this optional reconversion. And so, you know, please make sure that you're communicating within your financial unit, within your vice chancellor area, to really understand what that direction is, that makes the appropriate sense for your projects and your departmental business. So this is really only going to be for the reconversion. If you have other cost transfers that you need to process or create other new projects, that'll all still be separate. And with the current processes that we have, you can review the cost transfer user guide, and then we have also various unique service tickets to submit for creating new projects or tasks. There's a question about, is there any validation process in terms of the data that's entered in column I? No. So this is something that I really recommend collaborating and really centralizing within your units to ensure that the final is really the final. This does apply to health sciences departments, but the health sciences is going to be really managing the communications and data flow with their departments directly. This would not be the process to create new projects or tasks. This is only about a reconversion. If you need you have a new body of work or a new gift fund that you want to create a project on, you're going to continue to use the existing process of submitting a ticket to request that new project set. Default projects are not being included. Those those are set up per financial unit and have 2 tasks. And so those are separate from this as well. The deadline is April 28th. So let me come back over here to my slideshow. And I want to talk about the 774009 the transactions. So let me see if my screen share right here. Okay. So there's a few questions about, well, what about the 774009 carry forward transactions? Will those move? What will happen with those? So what's going to happen with those? If you have an entry on your project A, task 5 of 774009 and PPM of -$100. What we will do is we will move that to your new project in task 1. That will create that accounting movement. So then in the general ledger, you're going to see that $100 move from the project A. And then you'll see it in the general ledger under the new project B. After this reconversion, we will be removing carry forwards from PPM altogether. But we're doing that separately and after this, because this process will move that carry forward balance from the initial conversion. It will move it in the general ledger for you. So that will not be a step that you have to do. Okay, so I think I'm going to go ahead and move on now to there's still a couple more questions I think on the reconversion, but I think they're sort of slowing down there. I'm going to go ahead and move on to the other file that is available for you to take advantage of right now as a option for a mass update. Okay, so this is our project personnel assignments. Okay, so now shifting, we were just talking about reconversion of tasks to projects and doing mass cost transfers. Now we're talking about the people that are associated to your awards, your projects, and your tasks. Okay, so a shifting there. So what is our current process for updating your project personnel is to submit a ticket, right? To submit a services and support ticket. In the future, it's going to be a ticket. Okay, and long term, we are looking at a self-service web application to do this, but that is not really even yet on the roadmap, right? We know that's something we want, but we haven't even started development on that yet. Okay, so the current process is a ticket. Future process is going to be a ticket. However, right now, what we're offering you is to do a mass update without a ticket, right? We have a file available for you, and you can update this file, and then we will do that mass update for you. Again, this is also going to be due by April 28th. This file will be processed before the reconversion. We're doing that so that if you do have any updates that you want to make on your tasks that are going to be reconverted, we will apply that new data. Okay, so this is going to be processed first, and then the option A reconversion will be processed. Okay, so in this file, you're only updating orange columns, and you're only updating data if you want it changed. If it already has the correct the correct person associated, then no need to make any updates. Okay. The other trick in this file is that if you do have, let's say, 3 tasks on an award, you're going to need to list the award personnel 3 times. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pull up this knowledge base article. So this KBA is, let's see. Okay, I think, can you still see? I'm hoping you can see the KBA. If you can't, let me know. So this KBA talks all about the project personnel. So within PPM, you can associate people with your projects and your tasks. Your awards, your projects, and your tasks. Okay, so there's kind of 3 levels. So this process we're talking about now applies to all project types. Okay, this will apply to sponsored projects if you choose to, general projects, capital projects, default projects. All projects, you can update the people that are associated with your projects and tasks. Okay, so I'm going to just walk through this KBA to familiarize or maybe even refamiliarize yourself with these project personnel roles. These are not security roles. I really want to highlight that. This is really about, who's the fund manager on my project? Who's the MSO associated with my project? Who's the task manager on my project? And we're really working on helping to make this mass update right now, because we know that as more and more reports are coming out, this is becoming a stronger and stronger need to be able to group data and financials by person, right? So that you can manage maybe your workload or your portfolio. So what are the roles available? I'm gonna walk through the roles first, and then I'm gonna show you the file that you have to update. Okay, so within the sponsored projects realm, that's really where we're working mostly with at the award level. Okay, so there's a principal investigator that's not really available for you to update. That's populated from Kuali on the research award. Then you have an MSO, a DBO, CAO. Right? Different departments have different titles, but really that chief administrative officer, right? So that's at the award level. You can also assign it at the project level. Project manager. So this is generally the PI for sponsored projects, and it is required on every project to have a project manager. Fund manager. Who's the fund manager for this award? Who do we go to ask questions about the administration of this? Fiscal manager. This is optional. Some departments have more layers in their administrative structure, and so they would like to be able to use both a fund manager and a fiscal manager, but some don't. Task manager, so this is now at the task level. So this might be used if there is a separate PI that's responsible for one task's worth of work. And a task fund manager. Similarly, if there's a different fund manager that's managing a task separate from the overall award fund manager, then you can have that more granularity. So a non-sponsored project. So this is really now looking at your general projects, your capital projects, your default projects. Same roles, right? But now there's no more award level, right? Because this is just the projects and tasks. So same role, your MSO, the Chief Administrative Officer, project manager, right? So for non-sponsored, this might be an administrator, right? This might be the MSO. So it might be the same, or this could be the faculty member if this was for, maybe their startup funds, let's say. Fund manager and fiscal manager again. And we also, I didn't call this out, if they're required, recommended, or optional, it's here on the right-hand side. And then task manager and task fund manager. So again, if you want it more granular, if there are multiple people within a project that you want to separate out, this person's responsible for this piece and this person's responsible for this piece. Okay, so these are the various roles available and how we recommend them being used. We really came up with the recommended and optional with a group of department users, and we did vet this through the BFG and the steering committee as well. So now let's look at the file if you want to update your project personnel. So the process with the project personnel update is a little bit different, okay? And what I mean by that is, with the other file I showed, it's broken out by your entity. This one is not, because there can be some overlap here, right? One award might have two different projects on it that belong to two different project owning organizations. So we have one file for everyone. So what we're asking is that you download this template and then save it with the name of your department or your financial unit at the end of this file name, okay, and then re-upload it to this folder. Okay, so please do not update this template, because this is the template for everyone to download and update. So let's look at the data. So when you look at this data, everything in green is what we have already pre-populated for you. This is what is in the system today. So some of you might have only awards with, try that, an example here. There we go. So this is the data that's currently in the system. If it's blank, it means that there is nobody in that particular field. What you'll want to do in your downloaded copy of this template is update the orange columns. And notice you're updating the email address of who you would like to be in that role. I would really recommend using Blink to ensure that you're grabbing the right email address. And then, yeah, so you're only entering the email address and only if it's different. So for instance, if Laura is still the fund manager, you can leave this blank. But if Laura is no longer the fund manager, you'd want to put the email address here of who the updated person is that you would like. So as we scroll along, again, if you want to update the MSO, you can put the email address here. Fiscal manager, if you want to update it. Now we're getting into the project area, right? So with sponsored projects, you have an award, project, and task. You notice at the top of this file, there was no award data because those were probably non-sponsored projects. And so they'll only have this project related data. So again, you have your project number, name, owning organization. Again, if you want to change the project manager, please enter the email address here. This field of all the fields is a very finicky field, so please really make sure that your email address that you enter is correct. Fund manager, there's an orange field, orange. Now here's the task. And so you can enter a task manager or task fund manager. So one of the things I really want to highlight here, so if we look at even just this example that I have, these top two lines I'm showing, You can see this is the same project number. Okay, so we're going to have the same project manager. It's going to be listed twice. So if you were to change this project manager, you need to enter it the same in both of these rows. The reason that there are two rows is because there are two separate tasks, right? So you might want the tasks to be unique, but the project needs to be the same. Okay, so in terms of who to put at the different levels, I really recommend that the higher the level you can have the people associated with your award or your project, I think is better. It's less maintenance. It's grouped better as your entire project, your entire award. But we know that a lot of your tasks are individually managed, or that you want to manage them separately. And so that is why we do have the task level differentiations. You'll start to see on a number of reports, that's where these names are starting to come in, right? So, you know, where if there's a project manager, right? Whoever you have in the project manager, if you're going to pull up, show me everything for this project manager, then you want to make sure that it's the accurate project manager, for example. In terms of sponsored projects, I'm going to come back over here to our KBA real quick. In terms of sponsored projects, there are some downstream impacts in terms of who the people are that you associate on your award. And for sponsored projects, from a central office perspective, everything is at the award level. So even if there are two departments participating in the research, it's the lead organization, the lead PI, that is ultimately responsible. So in terms of the personnel, right, the MSO, we use that in Sparkum. We send out notices through Sparkum to the MSO and the fund manager. Those of you that have sponsor-initiated clinical trials and use Sparkum, the fiscal manager is used as well. So in terms of communications that go out from a central office for sponsored projects, it's at the award level. So keep that in mind. Okay, I am going to go over to the Q&A now. Okay. So there's a question about, I'll say, future state, right? So this is the one-time mass update that we are offering, and we're offering this right now to go ahead and get this updated for you. The future state is that you will be able to submit files of updates. So if you have an MSO leaves and you have 200 projects that are all associated with a particular MSO that you want to get updated, then you'll be able to submit that file that really just says, here's my project number, here's the new email address of the MSO that I want to assign, and we will process that. It's actually the same. The templates are already available through services and support. So it's going to be that same process, at least for now. But you can, it's not a one by one. You can upload a whole spreadsheet of 200 projects if you need to be. So again, the process through doing a mass update through the services and support ticket, so separate from this, you can do an entire group. It's not project by project, but we can take another look at that form if that's not clear. So if you do update someone today and then in 2 months they retire and you want to do a mass update, then yes, you would have to submit a ticket to update that. But you could do their entire portfolio in one ticket. For this file, when you download it and make a copy, you can do multiple fin units in the same time, or one division at the same time, one entity at the same time, as really makes the most sense for your organization. Okay, in terms of getting the template, this is also linked in the KBA that we discussed before, that covers both this reconversion option as well as this project personnel assignment option. But maybe we can go ahead and drop that link again in the chat. It's best if you can put the @ucsd.edu email in this file. But if you enter the let's say health or @eng or I'm not sure what some of our other prefixes are we have out there, then we'll scrub that data to make it the @ucsd. And again, I'd really recommend that the email address you enter is correct and that person really exists. Sometimes in the current process we have with tickets, sometimes those email addresses, they turn out not to be a valid email address. And so then those would not get processed. Health Sciences is not separately coordinating this process that I know of.
You're referring specifically to the personnel update.
To the personnel, yep.
Okay.
Yep, so Health Sciences is going to help coordinate the reconversion, but not the personnel. I do recommend updating your default projects at least to have the correct administrative officer, so that if there is any activity, or it's grouping and reports, I think that would be a really valuable exercise. Maybe you're not entering all of these levels of roles, but I do recommend that you update at least the administrative staff. So I would say the project manager and maybe the MSO. Okay, so again with this file here, so when you come into the folder that's linked in the KBA, so I'm showing kind of the parent folder. You're going to take this file and you are going to download it. You'll make your updates. You're going to save the file with your department or fin unit name at the end. And then you're going to go ahead and re-upload it. Okay, and the only fields that you're updating are those in orange. And you're just putting the email address that you want changed. If it's already correct, just leave it blank. If you have, let's say, a new employee, right? You're hiring someone, they're starting in a week. If they are already, a UCSD employee, then you can go ahead and put that new person's information in. If you're comfortable with it, they're comfortable with it. If they're not yet a UCSD employee, then this will not work because they need to have a valid email address. You cannot, if you have like a generic email mailbox, like opass@ucsd.edu, no, that will not work. This does need to be a unique person's email. We prefer you use your official UCSD email, but if you do have an alternate email, such as an @health.ucsd or another alias, we will scrub that to now make it a UCSD at ucsd.edu. And the link to the files are in the KBA, which has been put in the chat. We will process the personnel updates after the reconversion. So if you, so we will, so go ahead and update this with your current structure, and then we will use this personnel data to, in the reconversion and carry that forward. These roles, oh, let me show you again. I'm going to go back to the KBA about the personnel. So we talked through the different roles and what levels. These roles are also becoming more and more available in reporting. Right now, I can't off the top of my head tell you what reports are pulling in what names, but I do believe a number of the reports are pulling in principal investigator, project manager, and task manager. Okay. I think as more and more personnel are updated, then you know, we can make enhancements to future reports. I did want to show you, so thank you. Here's where you can see these roles within Oracle. So everything we're talking about are the personnel associated with your awards, your projects, your tasks within Oracle. So here's where you can see them directly within Oracle. So not within the reporting, but directly within Oracle. So here it is on the award space. It's on that first tab, details. No, that did not really work. So if you can't see this very well on this presentation, go ahead and go to the KBA about understanding the project personnel in Oracle, and there's some screenshots there on how to get there. So awards, this is where you can see that within the system. Who are the people associated with this award? Within projects, it's on the Manage Financial Project Settings tab. Oracle calls them team members in this space. Okay, and then for the task and task manager, as a department, right now, due to the security role limitations, you're not able to see this directly through Oracle, but here's what it looks like from a user interface perspective. Okay, so again, the file is linked within the KBA about both of these options. And the key thing with the project personnel updates is that this is everybody's data. So don't update this file, right? We want you to save a copy for your financial unit or your department or your entity, and then put it back in this same folder. Let me come back over here to the template. So I had scrolled down in this file, but so at the beginning rows, you can see there's no award data here. It's because if I scroll over to the right, they're all non-sponsored projects. Okay, so the again, in working with some department users on how is the best way to give you the data that is currently on your projects for you then to know if you want to update them or not. The request was to have a flattened file, which means to have sponsored and non-sponsored together. You know, if it's a non-sponsored project, then the award fields are blank. So just make sure you scroll all the way over as needed. Just kind of going through our Q&A right now. If there is any incorrect data that we get back, we're really gonna, process the data. We're not really doing any scrubbing of the data. So I really want you to take your time at making sure that your data that you enter is correct. But then we will have an output report when this is processed, so that if something didn't get updated properly, the email address wasn't correct, we weren't able to process it, we'll be able to have that in it. I really recommend coordinating this within your financial unit. So talk to your financial unit, your MSO or your supervisor, and coordinate who's doing this, so that you don't duplicate the data. Because we're not sure if you upload 2 files, we're just going to process the 2 files. There's a question about the character length for the orange fields. I don't think there's a character limit, but it does have to be there a correct email address. So I'm sure email addresses have some limit at some point, but it does have to be the actual email address, not a name, but the email address. You're welcome to download this file locally and coordinate your updates, and then have one single file that then one person is responsible for re-uploading or putting back in this common folder.
Hey, Marissa, really quickly, do you mind if I share my screen for 2 seconds?
By all means. There you go.
I just wanted to, I can do it really quick. So for those of you that already have a ticket in, so for example, if you had already, I know you won't use this form, but if you had already requested a new project and task, say you put in multiple requests, or you already have one pending, but you want to use this process, the spreadsheet, so that you don't have to manually move all the cost transfers or costs, all that stuff. Just go ahead and go into your ticket that you have for that request. If it has not been processed, I think right now general accounting has over 200 requests for new projects. And then if you can go down to this actions button on the right-hand side of your ticket. So again, that was just services and support, my stuff. Go into tickets and then close the ticket and just click OK, and that will basically cancel that request, and then you can just use this more automated process. And Marissa, maybe you can say, just as you mentioned, with if there were by chance multiple people in a department submitting the request, we're just going to upload the files. Conversely, if you leave this request in here and we don't know that you have another file, right, so just make sure that you're going in and closing out your services and support tickets, please.
Thank you. Okay.
I think one of the things I do want to add though is for these projects updates, we won't be able to update the personnel if the project or the award is inactive or expired.
Okay, great. So that kind of speaks to, there's a couple of questions about, if you see some old projects or some of the DNU projects in here that are kind of in process of being closed out, depending upon the status of, right when we're running this in Oracle, those wouldn't get updated. But hopefully we're closing them out anyway, so that's okay. And we will have an output file once this is completed to show what didn't get processed for whatever reason, maybe a bad email address, or like DC said, a bad status. And then we'll also have what was successful, so that you can double check that that's as intended.
Marissa, can you maybe talk about the timing for when I I'm not sure, is the target to get this back end of April and then try to complete the upload in May? I know they're all target dates and, right, there's a lot of cleanup, but did you address when we thought that these tasks may be converted to projects?
Thanks. So the both files are due back by April 28th. If you are participating, again, this is optional. Both of them are optional. And then we will process the project personnel updates first. And then once that is completed, then we will, we're going to be working on making sure that the reconversion will be, doing a couple of test runs of that before that is final processed, with the goal of that being done by May ledger close. So I anticipate that the personnel updates will be done probably within the first week or two of May, and then the final reconversion and more the mid to late May. And again, both of these are optional. You can do both. You can do, one or the other or neither of options. Okay, I'm just skimming through the Q&A here. You've got some great questions. I have a feeling a number of these, we'll kind of clean these up and have an FAQ that we can post after this.
Right, so there's been some requests around the file. So this is the KBA, just so you guys understand how it's structured, right? So there's the steps to take, and this is for the general project to task. So update A is if you want to convert your tasks to projects. You can read through here, but right here in the general projects folder is how you would actually get into the files. They're in OneDrive. So theoretically, everyone from health and all over UCSD should have access, which is why we load them here and maybe not in like Google, so to speak. So this is for update A. You go into this general projects folder. For update B, if you're only wanting, right, because you can do option A, update B, or both, then you would go into this folder here, and there's actually two links to the same folder, same thing. So that's how you would access the folders from the KBA.
Great, thank you, Laura. So we are going to be doing, some testing of this file as well, this mask update as well, with a couple of pilot groups. So yes, we will test this before doing it live in production. And then in terms of the ended projects, or those that are maybe you're waiting on an amendment, go ahead and make updates to anything that's in this file that you think needs to be updated. If for whatever reason there's a status that's kind of in flight, that'll come out in the output report, and we can address that at that time. So I don't want you to stress, I want you to work on getting the right people associated with your awards, projects, and tasks, and not stress as much about filtering out what might be closed or is closing. Just use the data that's there and make sure that you get the correct people associated with your awards, projects, and tasks. Okay, I'm going through, we've got a kind of a mix of questions again now. So talking both about the reconversion as well as the project personnel. Laura, remind me on our time. We go through to 10?
Yeah, I'm sorry. No, actually, I think this was a 1 hour. Let me confirm.
Sorry, I looked at the clock now. Wait, I want to be respectful of everybody's time here.
Yeah, it's 1 hour.
Okay.
If you have a few minutes, I have a few minutes until 10. I guess it's just if folks want to stay on the line, and if you have a few more you'd like to answer.
You know what, why don't we, just to respect everybody's time, we'll have this recording. I know there's some questions that we didn't get answered. I think we can group some of those and put together an FAQ to support this, and we'll send that out. So we can say, okay, so sounds like some people would really like to stay. So you know what, we'll keep recording and we'll keep going. I think I am free till 10 as well. So, okay. So for health sciences, again, so for the reconversion, health sciences is centrally coordinating and managing that, but for the project personnel updates, they are not. You can coordinate that on your own. And then okay, so somebody is asking if you currently have someone in a role, so project personnel, you currently have someone there and you actually want no one. So instead of updating that, you want no one. I'll have to get back to you on that one. We'll probably tackle that one separately because this one's really focused on updating. Yeah, and really just update for your for the project personnel, update only the orange columns and only what's applicable to your group. I think we covered this. So I'm just going through the Q&A. So I think I've covered you know, some of these questions. But if you see that didn't, okay, we talked a lot about kind of the updating of the files. So again, save a copy for your group and make your appropriate updates and update and re-upload that with your group's name at the end, leaving the overall file name the same. So be careful about multiple people. I really recommend coordinating within your group. So in the so there are still some questions about what reports on reports.ucsd.edu are using these various project personnel roles and how. And I don't have a list for you handy to say, you know, this report is using this report is using this. But as you go through those reports, if they do have a filter for the project manager or task manager or PI, then you'll see that name, and that's how it ties together with what we've talked about here today. If you do have a multi you know, PI award and you want to assign that task manager to be that unique PI, I do believe that in the reports that just came out for faculty, the My Funds report, I do believe that is at the task level, and so then that would be reducing it down to just that, I'll say co-PI for that task. That's my understanding, at least. And as you come up with, you know, maybe more reports that you need additional reporting on or names on, you know, there's a process to submit an enhancement request. So you can, you know, please feel free to do that. And then also on the project balances and expenditure detail report, we are currently in our dev environment already have it set up to pull in all of your award personnel or project personnel. So that is in the works. The email address that you put on this project personnel does have to be a real UCSD email, and they do have to be in essentially there's a communication between the UC Path database and our HCM databases and my affiliates with Oracle, so it has to be within that Oracle database. That. So again, we will update the project personnel first, and then do the reconversion. We don't recommend 2 project managers in one project, and this process would not even allow for that. If you do have a need for that, I would consider looking at leveraging a task fund manager and a project manager. Okay, I'm seeing, oh, so when you download the project personnel file, we do have the project owning organization and the award owning organization in the file. Let me bring that up again here. And so if you needed to download and filter, okay, so you have your award owning organization here, and then you have the project owning organization here in queue. So those might be the fields that I would recommend filtering or sorting by. The organization names, remember, are the equivalent of your fin unit name. Okay, I'm getting some more questions again on the reconversion. So I'm going to kind of flip back and now answer a few more questions that we've received on the reconversion. Okay, so I'm going to, just to kind of keep us, I'll put this up as we have additional resources. Okay, so back to the reconversion. The question, if we've already created a new project and task, you would list the project and task in column I. Yep, so generally we're thinking that that would all be a task 1. So, but yeah, if you've already created your project and task and just want to participate in the mass cost transfer for that, then go ahead, just put your already created project and task in column I. So in terms of payroll, again, with UC Path, okay, so for the reconversion, we will move all of the existing payroll costs, but it would be up to you to update your funding in UC Path appropriately. I'm sorry, I don't know all the timing of UC Path and their dates of when funding needs to be updated or direct retros processed, so I can't be really more specific on that timeline. But it would be up to you to update your funding going forward. And we will communicate the new projects and tasks for you as soon as we have them. So I would plan on having that by the end of May. If you have processed any general ledger only transactions that now with a reconversion you would want to move, then yes, you would still need to do that manually and separately. This reconversion is purely focused on PPM and reconverting data in the PPM, but that PPM subledger does post data to the general ledger. So that's why as we do that mass cost transfer, it will update the accounting accordingly. But if you have done transactions outside of PPM, then those would need to be done manually. So there's a question about cleaning up with multiple financial units. This particular mass update is not addressing that. That has come up before, but we don't currently have that incorporated in this mass conversion. What I might suggest is to, actually, I don't have a best suggestion on that. I was going to say, go ahead and reconvert, maybe all of those tasks to separate projects, and then you can work on then those separation of projects differently. But if you have multiple financial units all within a single task, most likely you'll need to create separate projects and then do cost transfers appropriately. Also in May, we are hoping to release the ability for multi-select on cost transfers to make that cost transfer process a little bit easier. For commitments on the old project, so you would need to update any outstanding purchase orders. You would need to initiate that update, whether it be a purchase order or a travel event or anything. Any of the upstream systems you would need to update directly. And so when you make that update, let's say on a purchase order, and you change that project information, then that information would flow to PPM and essentially remove the commitment from the old and put it on. There's a question about when we need new projects and tasks, does the form for that require the same detail of obtaining the task manager and task fund manager? I'm not 100% clear on that question, but I would say the file for the reconversion is really focused on tell us if you want us to create a new project and task for you or do that mass cost transfer for you. And then the project personnel file is really about what people do you want updated on your projects and tasks. So a question about how do we type funding allocation to new projects created? So I think that is related to EPBCS. So you would need to, I think we'll probably need to get some more clarity in conjunction with the EPBCS team on that. But really anything in the general ledger you would need to adjust as needed, right? So if you had a funding, if you have an allocation and you need to move part of that to your new project, you would need to do that directly in the general ledger. That conversion will not close all the purchase orders. You would need to update those. Okay, so any of the, I'll say, completed transactions within PPM costs, that's what's going to be moved. But anything that is sort of in flight, you would need to update directly, right? So that's that open purchase order or contracts for your PPM billing. Those would all have to be updated manually. So those are things that you might really want to consider when you're thinking about potentially taking advantage of this option and this reconversion. So just to consider all of the things that you will still need to update potentially. There's a question about eCert reports. I believe they're at the project level. I don't think they're at the task level. If there's anything different, we'll include that in the FAQ, but I believe they're at the project. Okay. The link for the PPM user guide is, it will be linked in the slideshow. Also, if you go to the services and support and search in the KBAs and type PPM user guide, it should come up. We can probably link it here as well. Okay, I'm gonna go back through to the top here and see if I missed any questions. I think we talked about, we'll update the personnel first. So we'll carry that over if it is then on a reconversion project. think we talked about sort of the timing of when you'll have availability to what the new projects and tasks are for the reconversion. There's a question about, do GL to PPM variances need to be cleared first? I would say no, but you do need to make sure that those get cleaned, and that would probably need to be part of your cleanup activity. Right. So if it's supposed to go to the current project and task, but then ultimately you're reconverting that, when you do that cleanup for a transaction that isn't in PPM, then you'll just need to make sure that that gets cleaned up and updated as appropriate. A couple more with payroll. In terms of creation of new chart strings, that actually didn't come up in our pilot, but I will talk to, I will see if we can do an auto creation of those chart strings so that they're all available for use in UCPath. So more to come on that one. And then again, if this change, this kind of mass cost transfer change we're doing would not be reflected in the DOPS because it's not an actual direct retro. And in terms of, especially regarding the direct retros, I'd say that really is something. If you do take advantage, or if you do opt in to the reconversion, and then you do a direct retro on something that was moved, then it will be something that I think you're really going to need to watch when that posts and make sure that it really posts correctly, or that you do those manual cost transfers so that it updates as needed. If you want to do just the mass transfer portion, it'll be everything. Okay. There's a question, can salary cost transfer be used for mass cost transfer? I think that's referring to just cost transfers in general, not specific to this reconversion. We do have a cost transfer guide that you can follow in terms of processing cost transfers, whether it be, individual transactions, different types of transactions, or a large number of transactions. PPM budgets will not be moved automatically. And EPBCS, not as familiar with that, so I'll clarify on that, but we currently do not have anything outlined to do any updates within EPBCS either. Yeah, as soon as you get the confirmation that your new projects and tasks have been created, you can begin using them. There's a question about, can current tasks be rolled into existing projects without creating new project numbers? So I think what that is saying is that if you currently have project 1 and project 2, and you want to take all the activity on project 1 task 2 and move it to project 2 task 3, can you do that? That would be that would really just be a cost transfer. So you can initiate that yourself right now. That would not be part of this reconversion. But there's no way to sort of tag, you can't use this file. And there's not a way to just reassociate that task from one project to another. You would need to actually move those costs. But that is a pretty simple mass cost transfer from a central office perspective. So I would suggest submitting a ticket for that.
Hey, Marissa, DC and I are chatting in the background, and there was a question about if there's a task manager associated, but they would like that removed. DC is saying that they can just update that in the column and say delete, and that he can build the logic to delete that task manager. And my question for DC is really, Does it need to be delete in caps? Can it just be the word delete any old way? Is there anything specific that you need to build that logic?
Consistency is good.
Just delete.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Awesome, thank you. Okay. Yeah. A question about if we need to do some cleanup, does this need to be done prior to conversion? I would always recommend doing cleanup first, but also knowing that we do have a very short turnaround time for this reconversion. So I think that really depends on what those specific activities are that you are wanting to clean up, and just thinking through the impacts of what that cleanup is. But if you really do think that you're going to need to reconvert something because of the short turnaround time, you might want to just go ahead and reconvert it and then work on your cleanup separately and do additional cost transfers. So it really kind of depends, but I hope that gives some ideas of things to consider. Okay, let's see. Go back through. I think I'm getting pretty close to the end here. Where are we at with time? Go ahead and stop the share here.
I think you've got about a minute. to wrap.
Okay, all right, great. So I think then I might just kind of call it. So I think we've got a little bit of follow-up on some of the FAQs, especially regarding, I think, some of the payroll. And let's see, stuff for you.
I want to address one thing.
Oh,
What I'll do is
yeah.
I'll add, because I know many of you are going to be, because we built out those files by entity. So what I'll do is we'll create folders. And if your entity is, for example, Chief Financial Officer, just go ahead and place when you re-upload, go ahead and place it in that folder, and we will assume that that is a completed file that's ready for upload.
Great, thank you, Laura. Okay, well, since we're at 10 o'clock, thank you all so much for hanging around, and I hope that this gave you some food for thought on these two optional processes that you can take advantage of, and they're due by the 28th. So thank you so much. Have a great Friday and weekend.
Thank you, everybody.